Do you want to play one of the new Aether Drift commanders, but you simply don't have the budget for it? We might have the solution for you. Ketramose, the new Dawn. So why Ketramose? Well, for 3 mana, you get a 4/4 body with Menace, Lifelink, and Indestructible. Really crazy, I know, but that's not where it stops. Ketramose does have a tiny little downside. Can only attack or block when there are 7 or more cards in exile. Not just your cards, just 7 cards in general in the game in exile. So also your opponent's cards. Just need 7 or more. This is such a tiny little downside. It's one of the easiest things to do to get 7 cards in exile, especially when we get into the last ability. Whenever 1 or more cards are put into exile from the graveyard or the battlefield during your turn, you get to draw a card and you lose 1 life. Remember, this is not a mate trigger. Whenever a card gets exiled from the graveyard or the battlefield during your turn, you will lose 1 life and you will draw 1 card. So you can actually lose the game by your opponent's exiling stuff during your turn. Be careful. That being said, the ability is absolutely crazy. For exiling a card, you get to draw another card for the small cost of 1 life. Cards like Path to Exile, Source to Plowshares, Relic of Progenitus, well-known exiling cards that are really efficient in themselves, get even better with Ketramose. The value this dude generates is insane. He also comes with an indestructible body. He's really hard to deal with, so once he hits the table on turn 3 especially, he's really hard to remove and he will just keep generating value. The card advantage that Ketramose will generate over the course of a game in a well-built exile deck is just incredible. So how will we take advantage of Ketramose's awesome ability in this deck? For this deck, we decided to go with a budget version. When we checked the price on Moxfield, the price is only 75 euros to build a deck, which is a really good deal if you ask me. The power level is really high. We excluded tutors, game changer cards, but the deck still has really strong synergies and can sit at a table with most decks. It's not a CDH deck by any means, you will not be able to compete with those decks, but it's a great and cheap deck to play with your friends. So how did we build the deck? We play this deck as a drain deck. We play a ton of creatures that generate life whenever another creature enters the battlefield. We also play a ton of creatures that will make our opponents lose life whenever we gain life. It's a perfect synergy. You'll see all about it in the video. Obviously, Ketramose interacts really well with exile-based removal, like Source of Plowshares, D-Spark, whatever. It's just great. Every creature you remove, the card will also replace itself and draw a card. Ketramose is also really great with flicker effects, meaning cards you play and they exile a card and it returns to the battlefield. The card gets exiled, so we get a Ketramose trigger. Fantastic, get to draw another card. Obviously, with the flicker effect, we also play a lot of ETB creatures. So we blink the creature, it enters again, we get another ETB trigger and a Ketramose trigger. Just card draw upon card draw upon card draw. And that is where Orzhov usually is really weak at, drawing cards. Ketramose fixes that problem really, really well. Since Ketramose got spoiled, there were a lot of cards in the Ketramose package. These are cheap artifacts that interact with exiling cards from graveyards for a really low cost or just tapping them, and Ketramose will grant you card draw whenever we tap them. It's fantastic. Just wait until I talk about them later in the video and you'll be convinced, trust me. As usual, we'll be going really in-depth in this deck tech video, and I divided the video up in 5 categories, being the creatures, draw and ramp, support, interaction, and the lands. So without further ado, let's start with the creatures. First up, we have the Soul Sisters, Soul Warden and Soul's Attendant. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, not just under our control, just enters the battlefield in general, we gain 1 life. This can gain you a ton of life really fast, especially when you play against token players. Another version of the Soul Sisters is Hinterland Sanctifier, also gaining us 1 life whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control. We play this many life gain cards since Ketramose will be doing a ton of damage to us, but that also means we will be drawing a ton of cards. Lunarch Veteran, another 1-drop who does the same thing, gain us 1 life whenever a creature enters the battlefield. We can also cast him from our graveyard for his disturb cost. As Luminous Phantom, gaining us 1 life whenever a creature under our control leaves the battlefield. Whenever it dies, it also gets exiled instead, which will trigger Ketramose. Best card type like this, which gains us life whenever a creature enters the battlefield, is by far Guide of Souls. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we gain 1 life and also 1 energy. Whenever we attack with any creature while this is on the battlefield, we can pay 3 energy. We just gained of his ability. When we do, we get to put 2 +1/1 counters on a creature and grant it flying. Remember, our commander is an indestructible god with lifelink and menace. Those 2/2 counters add up really fast, allowing us to gain more life and actually swing for commander damage. Really, really good card in this deck. Remember Ketramose's awesome ability to draw cards whenever we exile a card? Mago Bonegnawer is a perfect example of this. Whenever we tap it, target player gets to remove 1 card from his graveyard from play, triggering Ketramose, drawing us a card and costing us 1 life. Whenever we cast a black spell, we get to untap the creature and do it again. This can result in some really disgusting loops where we draw a ton of cards of Ketramose. Crazy. As mentioned before, we will be playing a ton of Enter the Battlefield and Flicker creatures. Charming Prince is the first of it. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we get 3 options. You get to scry 2, gain 3 life, or we get to flicker another permanent, meaning it gets exiled, triggering Ketramose, and returning to the battlefield at the end of turn. Solid. Also a very good target to flicker with other cards. We just went over the creatures that gain us a ton of life. We also have creatures that will drain a ton of life. Corpse Knight. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, each opponent will lose 1 life. Do not underestimate how fast this damage can actually go when we play a ton of cheap creatures and a ton of flicker effects. Actually one of our win cons. Distinguished Conjurer. It's another version of the Soul Sisters, this time for 2 mana. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, we gain 1 life. For 5 mana and tapping it, we also get to blink a permanent we control, which is fantastic, triggering all our other Soul Sisters, triggering Ketramose all over again. Very good card. Elas Ilker. It's 2 mana, 2/2 Death Touch Body. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we get to gain 1 life once again. Whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent will lose 1 life. We don't really play around creatures dying in this deck, but yeah, it will happen and you will do damage this way. Karlov of the Ghost Council. This is my favorite card in the deck by far. It's 2 mana, 2/2, and whenever we gain life, we get to put 2 +1/1 counters on Karlov. If it would stop there, the card would already be fantastic. But he has another ability. For 2 mana and removing 6 counters of Karlov, we get the ability to exile a target creature. Insane removal. Also, this will trigger Ketramose, so we will draw a card of this already solid removal ability. With all the Soul Sister cards we're playing, remember, each separate trigger of a Soul Sister is an instance of gaining life. So when we have 2 Soul Sisters, play 1 creature, Karlov will gain 4 counters. And this just gets out of hand really quick, especially with blinking. Ketramose will draw us a ton of cards of his ability. His body will be huge. He will be removal on a stick. The card is busted in this deck. It's an insane card in a Lifegain deck. As you all know, Orzhov is really weak in the ramp section. That's why we play Knight of the White Orchid. Whenever it enters the battlefield and an opponent has more lands than we do, we can search our library for planes, put it into play untapped, and yeah, Bob's your uncle. With all our flicker effects we play, we can also flicker this, trigger the effect again, and opponents will always have more lands than we do, since we do not play any ramp. Very good addition. An absolute powerhouse in this deck is Loto Corrupt Sheriff. Where to start with this guy? He does everything that Orzhov is bad at. Whenever a player casts their 2nd spell in a turn, we lose 1 life and we get to create a treasure token. Drop this on turn 2, go around the table, you will probably have 3 treasure tokens by then at a small cost of 3 life. Loto also triggers of your 2nd spell cost each turn. It's just a fantastic card, gives a ton of treasure tokens, comes down on turn 2. It's an auto include in any Orzhov deck really, which is why we call it an absolute powerhouse. Philia, Exuberant Shepherd, an addition from the Modern Horizons 3 set. It's 2/2 dog who has flash. Whenever it attacks, we get to exile another target non-land permanent, and it just gets returned to the battlefield at the end of the turn. Fantastic, will trigger Ketramose. Whenever we exile one of our own permanents, Philia will also get a +1/+1 counter. Fantastic. Every time you swing, you get to draw a card of Ketramose, and you get to blink any of your ETB creatures. Just don't swing into any big creatures, because Philia will get blocked, and you will lose your dog. We also play Sinew of the Assassin's Creed set. It's a 2/1 Vigilance Flyer. When we tap it, we get to exile it and scry 2 and gain 2 life. The life gain is pretty nice in this deck. We play some drain effects which scale with it, and scrying is always good. Whenever a legendary creature we control attacks and isn't blocked, Ketramose has mana, so usually he will not be blocked, or we will find an opponent who cannot block it. We get to put Sinew onto the battlefield, attacking. Really fantastic. We can use his ability again, exile him again, trigger Ketramose once again. It's just a fantastic card, a value engine together with Ketramose. Probably one of the strongest cards in the deck is just an uncommon from Bloomburrow, Starscape Cleric. For 2 mana, we get a 2/1 flyer, and whenever we gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. Really solid win con in itself with all the life gain triggers we'll be having. For 3 mana, it also has the offspring mechanic, meaning it enters with a token copy of itself. It just doubles up on the draining effect. It's a really good creature to play early or late with the offspring. Both options are really solid. Suture Priest, another weird version of the Soul Sisters. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we gain life. Whenever an opponent's creature enters the battlefield under their control, they will lose a life. Grants us life gain triggers, which is what we want, and will slowly drain opponents, which is also what we want. Another awesome Ketramose card is Withered Witch. The card draw on this is just insane. For just 1 mana, we get to exile target card from a graveyard, meaning Ketramose will draw us a card. 1 generic mana for 1 card. It's a pretty good deal, right? Just imagine playing this Ketramose deck against a reanimation player. It's their absolute nightmare. We're just doing our own thing and we're disrupting their game plan. You will see how much grave hate we're actually running later on in the deck. One of the most popular flicker / blink cards is Flicker Wisp. It's a 3/1 flyer. When we play it, we get to blink a permanent, exiling it and returning it to the battlefield under our control. Meaning we get a card of Ketramose and we get another ETB trigger of the creature we just blinked. Fantastic. Another version of the cute little offspring bat we played is Marauding Blightpriest. Whenever we gain life, each opponent will lose 1 life. I cannot emphasize enough how fast people will lose the game when you just start gaining little bits of life. They will just be removed from the game in a couple of turns. An Orzhov Group Slug deck. Skyclave Apparition. Its removal on a creature. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to exile a non-land card with mana cost 4 or less. Really solid removal in itself. And we also get a Ketramose trigger from exiling a card. Yeah, Ketramose also works on our removal, not just our own creatures we exile. Whenever it leaves the battlefield, your opponents don't get the card back. No. They just get an XX token, with X being equal to the mana cost of the exiled card. So it's strictly just worse than what we exiled. It's a good card, especially if you can blink it with our blink effects. Repeatable removal. Veto. Whenever we gain life, target opponent loses that much life. This card is not each opponent, just target opponent, but it's still really solid. For 5 mana, he also gives all our creatures lifelink, which might be relevant in some cases. Just granting everything lifelink, swinging in, we get a lot of life gain triggers, and this might be necessary sometimes when we go really low in life with the Ketramose triggers. Remember, the triggers are not made triggers. We must lose 1 life and draw a card. For 4 mana, we have Chittering Witch, an awesome ETB creature. Whenever she enters the battlefield, we gain 1 red per opponent we have in this game. Usually this will be 3, so 4 bodies that enter the battlefield for 4 mana. All of our Soul Sister cards trigger separately per creature that enters. So if we have 2 Soul Sisters laying around, this card will grant 8 life gain triggers. Fantastic. Also with the blink cards, we can just blink this. She re-enters, we get more reds. And don't forget, we also get to sacrifice a creature, and target creature will gain -2/-2 until the end of turn. So she actually serves as a removal piece as well. Cliffhaven Vampire, one of the other win cons in our deck. Whenever we gain life, each opponent will lose a life. Fantastic with all the life gain triggers. Can't stress this enough how good these cards are. Just gaining a life is really easy, and dealing 1 to the entire table is actually really good. The first deck I'll be using one of the Enduring cards in. Enduring Tenacity. Whenever we gain life, target opponent loses that much life. When we play it for 4 mana, it enters as a creature. When people remove it, it just comes back to the battlefield as an enchantment, making it really, really hard to deal with. So your opponents will actually have to deal with this twice. Pelidar Guardian, one of the most classic blink cards. Whenever he enters the battlefield, we get to blink one of our permanents. We can blink lands, artifacts, creature, doesn't matter, we just blink them instantly. They don't return in the end step, they just go out and come in instantly once again. We have some combos with this card in the deck, I'll be talking about those later. Same principle, Icewind Stalwart. Also enters the battlefield and blinks a non-creature permanent. Returns instantly. We do play some warriors, so make sure you watch for that. Also serves as a combo piece. We will come back to this later. Ravenous Capybara. Its removal whenever he enters the battlefield. We just get to blink this like over and over and over again. And every time we do it, we get to destroy a creature. It's one of the better ETB creatures, really. Classic card, Resto Angel. 3/4 flyer with flash. Whenever she enters the battlefield, blinks a non-angel creature we control. Once again, instantly. Just moves it out, moves it in, instantly. Not at the end step, just another one of our combo pieces. We'll be talking about those later. Salvation Swan. One of the newer cards. Basically does the same thing as the other ones we just mentioned. Whenever it or another bird we control enters, we don't play any other birds. We get to exile one of our creatures we control. Returns at the end step with a flying counter if it didn't have flying. It's just blinking and might give some things flying, which might be relevant. We could even blink Ketramose and give it a flying counter. Not too shabby on such a big body. The most complex card in this deck by far is Abdel Adrian. He's one of our combo pieces. Whenever he enters, he exiles any non-land permanents we control until he leaves the battlefield. And we get X11 soldier tokens equal to the amount of permanents we exiled. When he leaves the battlefield, we also get all the permanents back. Sort of an oblivion ring for our permanents, which grants us tokens and stuff. Yeah, I'll talk about this later in the combos. You knew he was gonna be here, Gary. In an ETB and Flicker deck, this is a must-have. Whenever he enters the battlefield, he deals damage equal to the devotion to black we have. He also has 2 black pips himself, and we gain that much life. Just imagine blinking this, having devotion on the board, it gets out of hand really fast, and opponents will be at a low life total anyways, because we will be draining them. Puppeteer, click. Honestly, you don't have to play this card. I just really like how it works and really like the interaction it has with opponents' graveyards. When this card enters the battlefield, we get to pick a target card from an opponent's graveyard, put it into the battlefield under our control, and it gains haste. So we can swing with it, reanimate any of their big creatures they used in the game. At the end of the turn, we have to exile it. Triggering Ketramose, drawing as a card. Fantastic. Card also has Undying, so when it dies, comes back with a -1/-1 counter. Triggering, again, also fantastic. Another Ketramose trigger, another body we get from someone's graveyard. Can be really game-changing. Grave Titan, an excellent blocker. 6/6 body, Death Touch, enters the battlefield with 2/2/2 zombies. In this deck, we can blink it. The zombies will keep adding up. We will keep getting triggers on our Soul Sisters, making it a very solid curve topper. We didn't make a combo section for this video since we play 2 really easy combos, and I'll explain how they work now. We have a holy trinity in this deck, being Icebound Stalwart, Restoration Angel, and Felidar Guardian. You just need 2 of these cards to make an infinite loop together. Let's say we have Felidar Guardian in play. Then we play Resto Angel. Resto Angel will trigger and Felidar Guardian will be blinked. So leaves the battlefield, enters the battlefield again. Then Felidar Guardian will blink, exiling the Resto Angel and returning it to the battlefield. This will result in an infinite loop of them bouncing each other. This means infinite enter the battlefield effects, gaining us a ton of life or dealing a ton of damage with the other creature synergies we have in the deck. With Ketramose on the battlefield, these are infinite exiles, so we draw infinite cards as long as we have the life to pay for it. We can also stop the loop at any time we want. So this is just fantastic to draw the deck or just look for the cards you need in general. We have one more absolute combo machine in the deck. Abdel Adrian. For the combo to happen, we need 3 things. First up, we need a blink spell on instant speed, being Cloud Shift or Ephemerate. Then we need Restoration Angel or Felidar Guardian in play. So for 5 mana, we cast Abdel from hand. He enters the battlefield and we exile the Restoration Angel, gaining us a 1/1 warrior token in the process. The Restoration Angel is now exiled by Adrian. We then play Cloud Shift, targeting Abdel Adrian. He will leave the battlefield and instantly enter again, meaning we get Restoration Angel back, triggering. We use a trigger on Abdel Adrian once again, meaning Abdel Adrian will leave the battlefield and instantly enter again, putting a Restoration Angel trigger on the stack and putting an Abdel Adrian trigger on the stack. First up, we resolve Abdel Adrian's trigger. We get to exile any number of non-land permanents and get that many soldier tokens instead. Then we resolve the Restoration Angel trigger, which is also targeted by Abdel Adrian. Abdel will leave the battlefield again, we will get everything back, and the cycle just repeats. This means, again, we get infinite exiles, infinite untapping of any non-land permanent. So if we have a mana rock, we get infinite mana. We get infinite 1/1 soldiers and infinite enter the battlefields. It's a really crazy combo. I find it really complex, but it really works great. That's it for a tiny combo section of the video. Before we continue into the part that makes Ketramose really good, the draw and ramp section, if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. This supports us to make more content like this for you. Draw and ramp. Obviously, Ketramose is great at drawing cards, and you'll see why now. Bag of Holding. It's an awesome artifact. Whenever we discard a card, we get to exile the card we discarded instead. We play this obviously for Ketramose triggers. Doesn't stop there. For 2 mana and tapping it, we get to draw a card and discard a card. With Ketramose on the field, this means we draw a card, discard a card from our hand, whichever one we want, discard it, gets exiled, and we get to draw another card. So it just draws us 2 cards for 2 mana. Fantastic. Additionally, for 4 mana, we can tap the bag and also return all the cards exiled with the bag to our hand. It's an upside, we don't really play it for this, but yeah, you can do it if you want. Currency Converter. It's also like a Bag of Holding, but just better. Whenever we discard a card, we also get the option to exile it, triggering Ketramose. For 2 mana, tapping it, we get to draw a card, discard a card. Same thing as Bag of Holding, we get to draw 2 cards instead of it. We can also tap it without investing any mana in it, and we get to put a card exiled with currency converter into our graveyard, meaning we can target it with our other abilities to also draw cards of Ketramose. If we do this with a land card, we get to create a treasure token, effectively ramping us. Grants us draw of Ketramose, grants us treasure tokens of itself. It's an auto-include in this deck. This efficient Duskmourn artifact is just fantastic. Ghost Vacuum. We can tap it, exile a card from a graveyard, meaning Ketramose will draw a card, gets out of hand really fast if you have these artifacts out, can just tap them and keep drawing cards of it every turn, once again and again and again. For 6 mana and tapping it, we can also sacrifice it and create a copy of every creature exiled with Ghost Vacuum. It just has a 1/1 flyer as base stats. Really good card. We won't be using the second effect much, but it might be relevant in some long and grindy games. Yeah, you knew this was going to be in there. Relic of Progenitus. Yeah, 1 mana, tap it. A card gets exiled from a graveyard. We get to draw of Ketramose. Fantastic. For 1 mana, we get to sacrifice it, exile it, and exile all graveyards. And we also get to draw a card. When we activate this ability, this actually means we draw 3 cards. Since the relic gets exiled, the graveyards get exiled, and relic also states draw a card. So with Ketramose on the field, the value on this is just incredible. Talk about value. Same principle as a Relic of Progenitus. Scrabbling Cross, really efficient. 1 mana, tap it, cards gets exiled from a graveyard, we get to draw. Can sacrifice for 1 mana, and we also get to draw cards. It's just insane with Ketramose. You have to play these artifact packages. The card draw is crazy, especially in Orzhov, which doesn't usually have card draw. Very efficient non-artifact draw card is Cling to Dust. 1 mana, and we get to exile a card from a graveyard, drawing a card in the process. If it's a non-creature card, we also get to draw a card of Cling to Dust, resulting in 2 cards. Fantastic. Doesn't stop there. It also has an escape cost. When we escape, we exile cards from our graveyard and can cast it again. Paying for the escape cost also will draw us 1 card with Ketramose on the field, since we are exiling cards from our graveyard, as long as we cast this during our turn. Finishing up the draw and ramp section, we also have 4 mana rocks, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, a Talisman, and a Signet. Fantastic. Now we're going to get into the support cards. In my opinion, these are the most fantastic and interesting cards in the entire deck. Cleric's Class. 1 mana enchantment. Whenever we gain life, we gain that much life plus 1 instead. This doesn't double the trigger, sadly. We just get 1 life gain trigger, but it is increased by 1. Still good. Main reason we play this is if we get the class to the 2nd level. Whenever we gain life, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. With an Indestructible commander with Menace and Lifelink, this gets out of hand really, really fast. The Indestructible commander will be huge, and sometimes you will be able to swing to people for commander damage. 21 damage. Game's over. We mainly play it for the previous reason. If we get it to the final level, we also get to reanimate a creature from our graveyard and we gain some life. It's solid, not a reason why we play it, but might be an upside in a long game. Cloud Shift, probably the 2nd best blink spell ever printed. 1 mana, we play it, creature gets blinked, instantly returns. We get a Ketramose trigger, we get an ETB trigger, and also combos with Abdel. Now, the absolute best blink spell, Ephemerate. Same principle, 1 mana, we get to blink a creature. Instantly returning, yada yada, gaining us life, ETB trigger, Ketramose trigger, yada yada. What makes it this strong is Rebound. Whenever we play it, it resolves, so we get to blink a Cloud Shift, then resolves, and the next turn, the next upkeep, we get to cast it again for free. It's like an echo effect. We play it, next turn automatically gets played again. So we get 2 costs for the cost of 1 mana. It's a really good blink card. It's the best by far. One of the best mechanics in a multiplayer game in Orzhov is Extort. Whenever we cast a card, we get to pay black or white, and every opponent will lose 1 life, we will gain that much life. Really awesome to drain the table. Blind Obedience is an enchantment, makes every creature and artifact an opponent controls enter the battlefield tapped. This just shuts down some strategies, makes combos unable to happen, and just slows down the game so we have more time to drain our opponents. Lion's Sash, my favorite card in the deck. It's a 2 mana creature with Reconfigure, meaning it's actually an equipment. For 1 white mana, we get to exile a card from graveyard, meaning this will trigger Ketramose. 1 mana for 1 card. Insane deal. If it was a permanent card, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on Lion's Sash, meaning it actually grows in power. We can also reconfigure it and equip it on Ketramose. Ketramose's body will be insanely huge because it gets buffed per +1/+1 counter on Lion's Sash. He's indestructible, equipment is fantastic with him. Lion's Sash is just great. Draws you a ton of cards, 1 mana for 1 card, and Ketramose's body will be insanely huge. Ready to swing for lethal. Parting Gust, a newer blink card. Fantastic. 2 white mana, we get to blink a creature. If we promise the gift, so give someone a fish, the creature doesn't return anymore, effectively ending up as a removal spell. Really good card, really efficient, once again. The only planeswalker we play in this deck is Kaya, Orzhov Usurper. +1 exiles cards from graveyards and grants us life. With Ketramose on the battlefield, this means the +1 will also gain us card draw. Fantastic. Protecting planeswalkers is really easy if you have an indestructible powerhouse as a commander to protect them. The -1 ability exiles cards with mana cost 1 or less. Perfect if you don't like someone and really want to get their soul ring. Also gives a Ketramose trigger. Kaya's ult is also great. -5, really easy to get to with Ketramose to protect her. Target opponent takes damage equal to the number of cards they own in exile, which will be a lot versus a Ketramose deck. In most cases, this is a game finisher. Last up, Conjurer's Closet, Blink Player's Dream, 5 colorless mana. At every end step, we get to exile a creature and it returns to the battlefield. So great, granting us more triggers, ETBs, flicker effects, Ketramose triggers, whatever. Fantastic. Before we continue into the interaction section, this Ketramose deck is the 4th commander we do of our top 5 Aether Drift commanders we did a deck about. So make sure to check out that video. We did a combo deck, we did a mid-range deck, we did a competitive deck. This is our take on a budget deck. It's the first time we do this, so let us know in the comments below. Do you like budget decks? Do you prefer really expensive decks that are really fine-tuned? Or do you like budget decks like this, which are also really great, have really great synergies? But yeah, we just don't play expensive cards like tutors and stuff. Let us know in the comments. That being said, let's get into the interaction spells. Swords, Spot, you knew you were going to be here. They're the most efficient removal spells in Magic, and with Ketramose out on the field, they will draw us a card. The value is just bananas. It's a fantastic removal spell. If we overload it, it serves as a board wipe. Our commander is indestructible anyway, so we really don't care. It's a great way to reset the board. D-Spark, 2 mana, instant spell. We get to exile a permanent with mana cost 4 or greater. Remember, all of the removal spells in this section also draws a card if they exile, due to Ketramose being our commander. Epic Downfall, 2 mana, exiles a creature with mana cost 3 or higher. Perfect commander hit for the other players at your table. Exercise, deals with artifacts, enchantments, or big creatures. Also draws us a card. Anguished Unmaking deals with any non-land permanent, exiling it, just costing us 3 life. Actually 4 with Ketramose on the field, since he will also draw us a card. Oblivion Ring. The reason why I like Oblivion Ring in this deck is because we can play it, exile a non-land permanent, and it will stay exiled until Oblivion Ring leaves the battlefield. Really good in itself. Also draws us a card of Ketramose. If we are able to blink Oblivion Ring, the card exiled with it will return, but we get to pick a new target and also draw a new card. That's why we play it in this deck, just because we can blink it. A new threat appeared on the table, we can just blink the Oblivion Ring and make the new threat go away. Touch the Spirit Realm. If we cast it for 3 mana, it's just an Oblivion Ring. If we channel it for 2 mana, it serves as a blink spell, just exiling something and returning it instantly. Fantastic with this deck. Versatility is what makes any card great. Astarion's Thirst. Probably one of the better removal spells you can play if you have an indestructible commander you can actually swing with. Exiles a creature, so draws us a card with Ketramose, and we get to put X +1/+1 counters on Ketramose equal to the exiled creature's power. Pretty good if you have an indestructible commander, right? Baleful Mastery, you only have to pay 2 mana for this. Exiles a target creature or planeswalker. Yeah, with Ketramose we get to draw a card really efficient once again. Probably one of my favorite removal spells of all time is Murderous Cut. For 5 mana, destroys a creature, not that fantastic, but it also has the Delve mechanic, meaning we can exile cards for our graveyard to reduce the mana cost. Usually this will only cost 1 mana to destroy a creature. Great. Paying for the Delve cost by exiling cards also triggers Ketramose, so we get to draw a card. Last but not least, we have Starfall Invocation. It's a second board wipe we play. Remember that Ketramose has Indestructible, so board wipes is something he doesn't really care about. With Starfall Invocation, we also get to gift a card, meaning an opponent draws a card if we choose to give the gift. Then we also get to return 1 creature that died from this board wipe to the battlefield. So we will have Ketramose always surviving this and another additional creature, which might be really relevant late game. Last but not least, let's get into the lands. And this time, since it's a budget deck, we did not include the channel lands. A Ganju. First up, we play Vault of the Archangel. Taps for colorless. When we invest mana into it, tap it, all our creatures gain Death Touch and Lifelink until the end of turn. Fantastic to block with if you can give everything Death Touch. If your opponents don't know you have this land lying around. And the Lifelink will just grant us additional life gain triggers. We play 1 command tower, 1 filter land, 1 pain land, 1 check land, 1 reveal land, 13 swamps, and 15 plains. It's a budget deck, we play a lot of basics just to keep the price down. And it also works fantastically. That's it for our Ketramose budget deck. For 75 euros, you will get the entire deck. Disclaimer, without the commanders. Since Ketramose is at a really high price point this time, it's insane. It's a budget deck, but it's not weak by any means. The synergies in this deck and the amount of removal you run make you able to actually play with really strong decks on a really low price. So yeah, give it a go. We enjoy making all of this content, but we want to know, what type of deck do you like to see? Do you like a budget deck most? A mid-range deck? A really valuable deck, a combo deck, a CDH deck even, just the most powerful deck, or the cheapest deck, or the most synergistic deck, most fun deck, most interactive deck? Let us know in the comments below, because I was actually surprised by how fun it was making a budget deck. It's the first time I ever did it. Usually I make decks really powerful, really expensive, but yeah, this is really fun and powerful and cheap deck. So thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit like. Thanks for all the support, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.